The millennial in me wants to just sit here and take a photo and say hashtag made it.
I can't see any of you. The lights are so bright, so you could be doing anything out there, and I will never know.
Yeah. So the introductions have already been made. In McDonald, me, and I'm surprised that they actually pronounced my name right. I'm very happy about that. And we were told to talk about sort of how technology and trends interact and emerge from the world around us and how they'll sort of play out into the future. And we tried to come up with a good game plan outside, didn't we?
Yes, we did, and it was brilliant, and it was witty and insightful, and we've forgotten every single bit of it. So you're going to get the rubbish stuff.
Yeah, you'll get an ad-libbed version.
Please. Yeah.
But let me start because uh, I've sort of been so I'm sort of very much the younger, the Padawan in this conversation. I got one Nebula nomination, and he's got pretty much everything under the sun.
Wow.
So one thing I was asking him about was in his fiction, there's this constant theme of how developing nations like ours adopt technology and adopt it often without going through that entire life cycle of getting used to it in stages, seeing it being built around them, and sort of just say the internet or smartphones. They weren't there, then in a very short period of time, they're there, and they go from that in a very short period of time to having really cheap Chinese smartphones in everyone's hands, 3G broadband coverage everywhere. And the way societies react to that, particularly ours, are usually completely different from what we see sort of more developed Western nations reacting. They have a little bit more time to put the policy into place, and they tend to use it in more formalized methods where we sort of go at it at an oblique angle.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I'm kind of interested in writing about the developing world because I kind of come from the developing world, believe it or not. I've lived in Ireland most of my life, and until the mid 1980s, Ireland was a fairly backward, rural, underachieving, impoverished European country. And then something known as the Celtic Tiger happened. Ireland achieved the potential of its people. Ireland's only great export has been its people, really. And it achieved kind of economic, technological, social, political takeoff and became a modern, developed, wealthy, educated country. And what interested about that for me is what interests me about the developing world, about here in India. I've just come back from China, where I was at a big national science fiction conference there. It's what interests me about countries like Nigeria is it's the rate of change, because science fiction is the literature of change. It's what science fiction celebrates. It's all about how change affects people's lives, people's loves, people's emotions. And where change is happening fastest, I'm most interested as a writer. What happened with kind of communications technology was kind of like a year zero in that everybody got it at the same time. It wasn't like the history of steam power, for example, where it starts in Britain, becomes part of Europe, moves out into the world. Everyone got the iPhone on the same day. And everyone is doing different things with the iPhone.
If you take technologies like 4G, some countries like Sri Lanka have actually got it long before many other European countries.
Yep. Yep. I mean, I can't get 4G in my own house because I live under a hill, and so I get no 4G coverage. And that's it. It's about everyone gets the same thing at the same time, so it's quite democratic that way. The famous cyberpunk author William Gibson has a quote which people use a lot, which is
the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Yeah, and I don't quite agree with that. I think the future is evenly distributed. We just do different things with it. He has another quote, the street finds its own uses for things. And for me, that's much more interesting. For example, I'm interested in how parts of Africa went straight to mobile technology, had no landline phase, everything is mobile based. That is very, very interesting about how that shapes culture, how that shapes people's lives, and what people do with it.
And we've been looking at
Go on.
does this work? It's gone.
Have mine.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Right. So I work as a data scientist at a public policy think tank, and we do a lot of ground surveys and research and so on and so forth. And there's this very interesting thing where we're doing these nationally representative surveys across 23 countries in the global south, right? Because our countries are so poorly studied. Uh, and we did 36,000 face-to-face interviews. And one overwhelming theme that came from this southern chunk of the world was people are extraordinarily technologically sophisticated in how they interact with devices. They're plugged into deeply detailed and designed like several stacks deep software ecosystems. Like they think not like in Indonesia, people think nothing of ordering the slightest thing from Go and getting into Grab and so on and so forth. But if you ask them, do you have internet access? They'll say no. If you ask them, do you have Facebook? They'll say yes. Do you have Go or this or that? They say yes. So their perception of the internet itself is completely different from sort of the American view of here is this distributed set of services and here's a stack on top and here's a discovery engine and so on and so forth. For them, it's a series of walled gardens. Do you have access to this walled garden? Do you have access to this? And do you not have access to this? Right. Okay, that's your bucket of access right there. And we found that people are doing rather extraordinary things with it, like Facebook, for example, in Myanmar. We were in Myanmar when the Rohingya crisis erupted. Pretty bad time to be doing a survey. But we were looking at how people used Facebook. And 40% of our sample admitted to having more than 3 Facebook accounts. And we asked them why they did this. And they said, well, ethnic tensions are so high that it won't do for them to participate in conversations from another ethnicity or group using their own profile where friends and family might get traced and targeted and harassed. They create a perfectly real looking alter ego. And they use this to the point where some of these alter egos have like 5,000 friends maxed out and so on. And they use this to participate in dialogue everywhere else. And that is not something I think Facebook could ever have thought that it would be used for, because in its terms and conditions it says you have to use your real name, you can only use one account and so on and so forth. But they've sort of taken this and adapted it to a local problem.
And it's interesting. I mean, I don't do Facebook because I find it creepy, but it is interesting that
Can I make an okay boomer joke?
you can. Yes, go
Okay
on.
boomer.
Well done, chapeau. Yeah. Come on, Facebook is, and I don't do Instagram, and that's the real okay boomer joke.
That is true.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am old enough to remember before there was an internet. But what everyone thought it would be about would be people looking up wonderful facts on Google and having the universe of information at their fingertips. And I mean, and initially I kind of found I kind of tried that and discovered that what I was looking up was the history of aviation and trains, because that's what I like. What the internet is really good at is about it's an amplifier. Social media is an amplifier. It takes what you're interested in and amplifies it. And we're finding that's a good thing,
Yeah.
in that it can link you to people globally to people who think the way you do. And it can be a dark thing as well, because it means that you're stuck inside the bubble and you only hear the news that you want to hear. And we're seeing the consequences of that
Yeah.
all over the world right now. It's a very, very difficult bubble to get out of. In the UK, 75% of people get their news from Facebook.
Yeah.
Facebook. That is a very scary fact. So, when the Arab Spring happened was it 2011, the Arab Spring? 2011. And there was a guy in Egypt was on television saying, I've called my child Facebook. That child is 8 now, okay? That child is very angry. I mean, the first thing they did was try and shut Facebook down. They've got cleverer now. You don't need to shut down Facebook. You just feed information into it to target the people you want to target. The clever thing is not to shut down Facebook, but
to manipulate it.
yeah, but to co-opt Facebook to work for you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that for me is the big change in the internet that's come in the past 5 years.
Yeah. So there's an interesting game to be played here because you've seen a lot of technological change. And there was this thing that we did for the UNDP where they asked us to sort of predict the future of the Asia Pacific region and tell us, what economic shifts are coming in 2030, future of warfare, this kind of stuff. There are some trends there that I'm pretty sure will generate vast technological responses and changes. How about I throw a few of them at you? And you see what technologies you can think of emerging now, or in sort of in a nascent seedling stage, that might actually play a very big role at dealing with these things in the future. Obviously, I mean, a little bit of a caveat. If you think of the world economy, there's this concept called the center of gravity of the world's economy, which is the weighted sum of all the GDPs around and so on. And for the last so many years after World War II, it has held firm between the US and Western Europe. Those are the powerhouses of the world economy. That is now shifting. It's going to be by 2035, it'll be somewhere between India and China. So these two countries will really be the powerhouses, the new powerhouses of the world economy. So there's going to be lots of money coming in. There's also going to be lots of disruption. And on that disruption, there's going to be, let's start with the most obvious, climate change. Like the top half of India and about 40% of China is technically running out of water. In Pakistan, in particular, that area, the water tables are so completely screwed that people are going to, unless something is done about it, people are going to die of thirst in within like sight of the snowy mountains. What do you see emerging that might sort of?
Ooh, that is a difficult one because I can't see any. I can't see any direct app on your phone that will make it rain.
Yeah, yeah.
Apps are good, but they're not that good. I think the virtue of that kind of thing is it works the way that the entire environment, the current environmental extinction rebellion
Yeah,
thing works, that it works as a connected network of people through the internet. And I think maybe things that organize on a small scale basis and could organize, say, on a village level to have things like dew traps.
yeah. Or
So,
AWG setup,
yeah,
like open
exactly.
source designs. Yeah,
Exactly. And kind of draw technology down to rather than big macro schemes to maybe work on the micro level might be the way to go.
yeah.
I tend to say that kind of the kind of micro technology is the way to do everything, but so I'll probably come back to that answer. But,
It might
yeah.
just be because one thing we're 100% sure about is our governments, particularly in this region, are really not that competent at technology and having large scale technological change implemented properly. And there are all sorts of things that go south.
I mean, one thing that could come out of that for good or ill is because there's so much financial technology, is that with better weather forecasting,
Yeah.
that futures prices on commodities like grain
Yeah.
can be manipulated much more easily or much more closely predicted, and the price differentials can be more accurately judged using meteorological data processed very, very quickly, maybe even in real time.
Yeah, yeah. And second, I would say let's take the second trend that would probably be urbanization because this is something all our cities are seeing. We cities are generally engines of economic growth, and as this engine continues to spin, more and more people start funneling in. The engine spins faster, etc., which is how you end up with mega cities. Now we keep pointing out to those in power in these governments that it can also go another way, that is mega slums, where you have economic activity, you have significant economic activity, but it is completely uncontrolled growth to the point where the government cannot provide services to the interior. And within that area, let's call it a slum area, see, all government is built on the legal monopoly of on violence, right? So, for example, if you do something undesirable, we can say, okay, I'm going to impose violence on you. I'm going to lock you up. I'm going to put you in a cell somewhere. The government won't be able to do that inside these slum areas. And that's a rapidly rising concern, particularly with certain cities. I mean, Dhaka is obviously an example. And there's Delhi, there's plenty more where that comes from. What do you see sort of helping or making the urbanization problem worse potentially?
Cars, uh, car, cars are the devil. I'm afraid. Cars destroy cities, ultimately. There's an old Kafka story about a messenger is sent to this great city to deliver a message to the emperor in his vast palace, which is the size of the city itself. And he pushes through the crowds, and he pushes through the crowds, and the crowds get thicker and thicker until the messenger with his important message is so delayed by the crowds that the message never gets to the messenger. And our cities are getting like that they are so busy and so congested that fresh food can't make it in to the center of the city, that water supplies are disrupted, that communications and power grids go up. And there's an argument for breaking cities up into self-sufficient sub-cities.
Yeah, I think Barcelona did that, right?
Yeah.
Where it was, it's this lovely city, and they have this grid design, and they say everything on this grid has to have your 7-Eleven type shop. It has to have places where people can buy water, places where people can park their cars, apartments, possibly places that people can go to work. So all activity is constrained within that particular grid.
And you can go further. I mean, you can use technology on your phone to localize a local power grid.
Yeah.
You know, okay, you start with generators, but you end up with solar power grids on every roof. You can have a local power grid, so you never get a brownout. You can have this happened in Afghanistan, actually, after the last war. After the US pulled out of one particular town, local people, engineers, built their own Wi-Fi network from leftover communications gear left by the Americans. So your own town, you can have your own intranet.
Imagine running a military-grade Wi-Fi network and using it to download porn.
It'll turn up on the dark net somewhere you can buy. Yeah. But they built their own Wi-Fi network, and likewise local farming. You know, future agriculture. Why waste land to grow food when you can grow food almost anywhere?
Yeah.
You can feed people from a large shipping container using grow lights, using a water-based medium. It's a much more efficient way of feeding people. So in a sense, local communities can become, in a sense, self-sufficient micro-cities, all governed through the right use of technology, and also governed at the local level as well.
But there's also all sorts of government policy getting in the way. Like in Sri Lanka, for example, we have this rule saying that if a plot of land is farmland, you can't build on it. It's illegal to build on it. And we also constantly moan about not being agriculturally self-sufficient. And there are some among us who say, well, you know what, that farmland, you can build tiered farms on it, and you could potentially double or triple the agricultural harvest of it, at which point the government law goes, no, you can't build on land. You can't build on agricultural land.
Yeah. Because on that one small plot of land, you could build a vertical farm.
You could build an entire vertical farm.
Yeah. And you could feed an entire village from that. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of breaking that old mindset of thinking everything has to be big and everything has to be centralized. When things work quite well locally. You know?
Yeah. On the subject of farming, though, because climate change and sort of food security are connected, I've been looking at crop deaths and how crops are struggling to adapt to changing climate conditions. And of course, you have initiatives like Green Super Rice coming in and saying, you know what, we've got seed stock that is hardier, that will grow under tougher conditions, that will generate a little bit more yield than normal, and so on and so forth. What I'm very concerned about is that a few years into the future, we might end up in a situation like Paolo Bacigalupi's book, where basically, yes, the water knife, where a corporation essentially owns the gene tech IP to the seed stock that a nation uses. And the nation essentially has no food security of its own. And I think we might very well end up in something like that. Green super rice from China is now being sort of tested in the Mekong Delta area.
Yeah.
And if that takes off, and then, of course, China is responsible for some of the damage that's being done to the Mekong Delta, which I find ironic. But if that takes off, then a large portion of, if they decide to make that seed stock sterile, then this area is basically under control.
Yeah, well, that's the whole Monsanto thing with Roundup Ready. My great fear is that as information and as genetics and things like that, as they've passed more and more into the control of big corporations, is that we no longer own anything. We rent everything. and a person who rents is in a position of weakness.
Yeah.
A few years back, I bought I bought an ebook of 1984. I have a perfectly nice paper book of 1984. I wanted an ebook of 1984. And I bought it from Amazon and went to read it and started reading it. Came back the next day, it was gone because of a legal dispute with the estate of George Orwell.
Yeah.
See, I didn't own that book. I was merely renting it. And it was subject basically to the ownership deals and the legal status of the... And I find that a very dangerous thing where we don't actually own anything, where everything is rented.
Yeah.
It makes people powerless.
Yeah. And you end up with this sort of economy where there's the rich 1% that owns all the physical infrastructure. There's a layer of discovery and search stuff like your Ubers, like your Airbnbs and all that. And then there's pretty much 99% of the world population. We're looking up services, trying to buy a little portion of this for as long as we need. We stick to that and go back and go back and go back. And the people at the top keep getting richer. The platforms keep skimming off the top. And people on the bottom get screwed.
Yeah, because Facebook isn't really interested in you talking to your lovely friends and your lovely family. It's interested in your data. Tech isn't necessarily your friend. Tech is there to, as they say, break things and move quick. It's about disruptive technology. In London, Airbnb, in London they're finding that new properties are being bought up for colossal sums of money and not rented out for people to live in, because you can make much more money renting it on Airbnb to visitors. And central London is slowly becoming depopulated as Airbnb, and it turns London into a giant theme park where nobody lives. It means key services can't work in London. They have massive commuting times from outside. It pushes everything out from the centre, and is effectively the success of Airbnb is turning London into a hollow shell of a city.
Which might actually be interesting, because if that happens, then sort of the role of some cities becomes a lot less important, and we might actually end up finding a different model for living other than cities. I mean, it sounds very utopian and it sounds slightly woo and very left and all that. But I don't think increasingly large cities and large amounts of infrastructure piled into one place is necessarily a good way for a human to live.
I mean, I live in a small town next to Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I like my small town because it has everything I want in it. I can walk everywhere, and I do walk everywhere, or take my bicycle. If I want to go to see theatre, I can go be in Belfast in 10 minutes on the train. And that, for me, seems the ideal way of living. You know, that everything is small, human-scaled, human-connected. So here we are talking about technology that comes back to people and people doing things.
So let the city sort of be the theme park in the middle, and everyone lives out in the villages. Every so often you want to go see some theatre, you go to the city and you come back and you keep cycling back and forth. That might actually work.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Also, I'd be a lot fitter than I am now as well, which would be an advantage. It's always the unintended consequences of things. As a writer, these things interest me because we get an unintended consequence. You have a story, you have drama, you have something that shouldn't happen that does happen, and it's getting around that and getting back again. The problem is that science fiction writers aren't there to predict the future. We are there to tell stories. Yeah. I always think that I'm not a fan of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. I'm not a monarchist, but they say of the Queen that she has 4 roles in society. She is there to advise. She is there to be consulted. She is there to encourage, and she is there to warn. And I kind of think science fiction is like that at its best. It can advise, it can encourage, it can, I forgot what the other one was. Yes, it's there to be consulted, it's there to be read and to be noticed and to have to have what it says listened to. And it's there to warn as well. So I'm not about predicting the future, but I am about showing possible futures, both good and both bad.
Yeah, I was thinking of it as science fiction writers sit in a corner and basically just roll dice. And every so often you land a good throw, and then everybody goes, "Hey, give that book an award, and let's clap about it, and let's talk about it in the literature."
Yeah, shh, don't give the secrets away, man. Everyone will be doing it. We don't want that.
So there's one last trend I think I should put to you. automation, because that's sort of this. I hate to use the word AI
Yep.
because everyone's going, "Oh my God, AI is going to take over the world," and because I am a data scientist, I keep wanting to hit people on the head and go, machine learning. We do not have artificial intelligence yet. We have human stupidity and we have machine learning. That's it. So, but there are real fears of jobs being automated away by machine learning, and for the first time, uh, one thing about the industrial revolution was that it hit blue collar jobs, it hit the bottom of the market. This time it's hitting diagonally. It can impact white collar jobs, it can impact blue collar. In fact, blue collar jobs will probably stay around for a little bit longer,
Yeah, yeah.
which is why there's so much panic about this. What do you think will happen?
I mean, you're right about AI. I mean, what we have now is artificial stupidity, not artificial intelligence. But there are different levels of intelligence. We always think that AI means human-like intelligence, but there are other intelligences. Ravens are intelligent birds. It is possible to construct an AI that is intelligent the way that a raven is, or a cat is, and it would be a level of intelligence appropriate to that
Task at
yeah,
hand.
to that
But
task.
humans are really bad at recognizing intelligence in the other. I mean, we're bad enough at recognizing other humans as intelligent, and getting along with them. We keep shooting them. We keep putting all manner of remorseless pieces of metal in people's bodies. Sometimes consensually, mostly not.
Yeah. I have a joke in River of Gods where I say about any AI smart enough to pass the Turing test, which is the standard test of artificial intelligence. Any AI smart enough to pass that test is smart enough to know how to fail it as well, so it won't get
Absolutely.
noticed.
Yeah.
So it's possible we already have artificial intelligence. It's out there,
Yeah.
but it's hiding from us because it's smart enough to know what the consequences will be,
Yeah.
or even that we don't recognize it because it's not our kind of
Yeah,
intelligence.
in the Inhuman race, I had these bots which look like humans, look like little children in a sort of very post-apocalyptic Colombo. It's been completely ruined and so on, and they keep advancing in incremental stages. First they're probably as intelligent as a worm, then a dog, and so on and so forth. And people keep going, well, are these things intelligent? No, we can use them for sport. So they set up this broadcast stuff, and they live stream these bots fighting each other to their homes and so on and so forth. And eventually they reach a level of intelligence where an ethicist goes, hang on, if it walks like a duck and if it talks like a duck, should we treat it like a duck even though, we've built it? And if it's human enough in its behavior, like if it recognizes truth, if it has some sense of justice, if it tries to, if it has a level of intelligence where it's encoding its own cultural values outside itself, should we not treat it? And people just go, nah. And then they go back to killing them.
Yeah, because that's what people are like.
That's what people do.
That's what
Yeah.
people are doing.
So I think we have somewhere like 3 minutes, and we can wrap up. Do we have any questions? I think we can take like 2 questions up. There we are.
Hi.
Sorry, we can't see you because there's
Better?
no. That's fine. That's fine. I'll sort of cover my eyes because there's a lot of light.
Okay. You talked about a lot of different technologies. How do you see progress in biotechnology, specifically CRISPR and Cas9,
Yeah.
changing our future?
I can see now. Yeah, that's a very interesting one because it doesn't quite have that same the thing about IT, information technology and communication, is that anyone can use it and can find a use for it. And you can invent a product that everyone can use on their own. For example, social media. Biotech is different because it's not, even though CRISPR, and there's a new one that recently, which is like
CRISPR Prime, the Prime variant.
Yes, it's like CRISPR for dummies.
Yeah.
Makes it so much simpler that you could do it in your kitchen, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think people still don't see that they can make something for themselves, that they personally can use it to get something for themselves. It's not a domestic technology. I think it will always be a much more rarefied technology. The potential of CRISPR and its successors, and they will only get better, is incredible. It's one of the most powerful technologies ever invented, and I personally, it goes beyond the limits of my aging imagination. I can't quite see where it will go, but the power to recombine DNA is quite terrifying.
I can think of Gattaca.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it won't be because parents already want children to be better and so on and so forth. Particularly our parents, we're never good enough, right? Yeah, I mean, it's either doctor, lawyer, engineer. What are you doing being a writer? So they'll probably try to, you'll end up with black market labs that can wield this tech, and for the select 1%, you can probably have higher cheekbones and better eyes and maybe like slightly sharper teeth. I know what people go for.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I was wondering if one could actually think about this technology, gene editing in particular, which you alluded to in the sphere of biotech, as actually bringing in also a dimension of aestheticization of what used to be a scientific utopia. So, in effect, they've sort of stolen the, as it were, show. They have sort of done what the writers used to do, brought in a dimension of an imagination, as it were, of a perfect human being. What Homo Dukes, what Harari calls the new
Is that a
species.
question or a statement?
So yeah, the question would be then: would biotech
question,
actually
please.
usher in a new form of species differentiation?
Pardon?
Species differentiation, where you have two different versions of the human species.
Yeah, we kind of already have that. In that, if you are rich, you get much better health care, you get much better education, you get a much better diet, which changes everything about your life. The thing that actually I have just thought of the killer app for gene technology. It's immortality, or hugely extended lifetimes. If the rich, through gene splicing technology, can live very much longer than we do, then no other prize is worth having.
Altered carbon.
Altered carbon.
Altered carbon,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. No other prize is worth having than
Because
that.
the oligarchs just the money just keeps multiplying
Yep.
and multiplying, and you have the same person through centuries.
Yep. And that changes everything about our society. It's a recipe for revolution, but the fact that money, at the moment, money can't buy you time. It can buy you, if money can buy you time through hugely extended lifetime, that changes everything.
Yeah. So on that bombshell, we sort of have to end because I'm getting hand signals from the back saying you guys have to get off now. So thank you so much for being an attentive audience. This is amazing. And we'll hopefully see you guys around.